Well, thank you all again for joining on this webinar. It's been a pleasure seeing the evolution of your concepts through the challenge thus far. The refinement phase is a really exciting phase for us because that's when we get to see these ideas that are just sketched on paper or on the platform rather really come to life. So this phase is about taking ideas to action as quickly as possible and with the resources and the support that we'll be providing you with along this journey. Let me start sharing my screen again. To ground us again in why we're all here, this was the challenge question that we posed to you. Now it seems like ages ago for us all to come together and design around. How might we create a waste-free circular future by designing everyday products using Nike Grind materials? And all of you entered the private submission channel for this particular challenge, meaning that you will receive some support from us along this next refinement phase journey. And you can feel free to ask us any questions that you may have. We will also be sending out this webinar as a resource to all of you following this call, as well as the slide deck that we're providing. So know that all of this content in here will be in your hands shortly. Additionally, we asked you to submit some questions that you had about the refinement phase process. So a lot of those questions and the content relating to those questions has been woven into what we'll be covering today. This may look familiar. This is the materials list that we provided each of you with at the beginning of the challenge to start designing around. Most of you by now should have received your material shipments, so you can begin prototyping with the Nike Grind materials. It's been quite a long journey. For the challenge as a whole, including both the public and the private submissions, we received around 600 ideas on the platform. Out of all of those, as Eric mentioned, you were among the most promising ideas that moved forward into the refinement phase. And we had about 30 concepts that moved forward. And lastly, and in the refinement phase, we are here. The deadline for the refinement phase, when all of the prototypes need to be completed and your submission of refinement phase tasks need to be sent in to us, is July 16th at 5:00 p.m. Pacific. So please mark that on your calendars, create lots of calendar reminders. That is a very important date to keep in mind. At the end of this challenge, we will be selecting 5 top ideas. Up to 4 ideas will receive an award of $5,000 each from our partners at Nike, and 1 grand prize winner will receive an award of $30,000, which Chris will go a little bit deeper into.
Sure, thanks, Lauren. So as Lauren mentioned, it's pretty exciting that we have some nice prize packages at the end of the challenge. And so, you know, again, the top prize will receive $30,000 US, and then the subsequent 4 ideas will receive up to $5,000 US. And then what's really exciting about this this initiative is the potential for partnership with Nike. And so that'll be sort of devised on a case-by-case basis and really depending on needs of the company and sort of tailored to suit what makes the most sense moving forward. But it's a pretty exciting opportunity. So do keep that in mind as you're crafting your final prototypes. Perfect. And so you've probably seen this. Many of your concepts already fit these categories just to make it this far. But just to remind us all what types of solutions we'll be looking for in the challenge. And the first is going to be a product. So the proposed solution incorporates a significant amount of Nike Grind materials into the product. So not only are we looking for a product that's compelling and you know, user-centered, but most importantly, how can that product find as many opportunities to use high volumes of Nike Grind throughout the design. Number 2 will be innovation. So we're looking for concepts that are going to advance the way materials and waste materials can be repurposed into new valuable products. So again, not only in terms of design innovation and product innovation, but also in some ways some material and technical innovation. So how might we be coming up with some new and clever solutions for incorporating waste materials in ways that maybe they previously haven't been. So many of you are already well along that pathway, and we're just excited to see where you land. Number 3 will be prototypes. So again, you've probably seen this in some of the emails that we've been sending out, but we're really going to be looking for a mock-up or a prototype that demonstrates clearly what your product is, its technical feasibility, its usability, and overall desirability as a product in the marketplace. And so this, we encourage you to create a tangible and physical prototype that you can be sending over to Nike around July 16th. We'll get into that a bit more later this morning, but it can also be in the form of 2D mock-ups, blueprints, 3D modeling, so any sort of supporting material that is aligned with your typical process in terms of prototyping and crafting solutions. We'd love to see that. And then finally, business. So we're going to be looking for business model canvas. Again, many of you have already submitted those in your first rounds of applications. And if that's the case, we'll look for a little bit of evolution and to demonstrate a second layer of deeper thinking applied to the business model canvas. We'll also be looking for a scale plan and a rollout plan within there. So there are a couple of questions on our final submission survey that gets into how will you scale your idea, how do you plan to roll it out? And those will be very important factors as we're considering our potential winners.
Great. These were the refinement phase tasks that you received in the congratulations email of a few weeks ago. The core ones that are absolutely required are to design a prototype, create a business model canvas, create a rollout plan, and then the fourth, which is creating a team video, is optional. And we'll go a little bit deeper into which each of those look like.
Perfect. So again, as we started to get into designing and building a prototype is really the top task for this portion of the challenge. And so again, that can be either a physical prototype or a 2D model or 3D modeling and some mock-ups, or a combination of both. Really, we just want to see some evidence that you've taken these materials and started to push them, in an experiment with them, and see what they can and can't do in terms of your design intention, and how you're starting to apply some of those lessons from the R&D process into your final prototype. So a couple of questions that might help you as you're sort of navigating this process is, do the material properties support your initial hypothesis? So many of you are just getting your hands on these materials for the first time now, and we realize that your first rounds of submissions were based on some assumptions in terms of how these materials may exist and interact with your design concepts. So now that you've got your hands on them, do you need to reconsider different adhesives or binding materials? Is the density or the firmness or the elasticity of these materials supportive of your original design? And if not, how are you able to pivot and make some design adjustments in order to accommodate these materials? And then finally, have you put your prototype in front of some end users to receive feedback? So this may not apply to all of you. I know some of us on the call today are doing a bit more of industrial applications with these materials. But we'd like to see some evidence of feedback and testing. So whether or not you're working on infill for recreational roadways, have you actually managed to do some small fills or some test cases within that application? Or if you have a user-facing product, have you taken a scrappy mock-up and put it in the hands of your potential users just to generate some feedback? And we'd like to see evidence of that. Perfect. And next slide. All right, we can go on to the next slide, which is...
Did it change for you, Chris?
No, I think you got the same one twice. So just click through again. There you go. One more. Perfect. Business model canvas. So as we mentioned, many of you have already submitted this. It's a pretty common tool. You can find the links in this deck, which we'll share with you following this call. The links are also in the emails that we sent out to you announcing your sort of candidacy into the short list. But really, we'll just be looking for a nice, thorough thinking through the business model canvas. So if you have questions about this tool, certainly reach out to us, and we'll be looking for that. Click through. And so this is an example of the common business model canvas. Again, pretty common tool. You can do a quick Google search for business model canvas and find one. or you can follow the links to pull them off of our platforms, and you'll submit this final business model onto the submission survey. And so again, the business model canvas, it's a great tool for really quickly and sort of high level presenting some of the information you see here, who your partners, activities, cost structure, revenue streams, but we'll also be looking for evidence of scale and rollout plans. So how can you take the business model canvas as a high level presentation and go a little bit deeper? So we'll really understand what are your plans in the next, following the challenge for 3 months out, 6 months out, a year out. What are the goals that you hope to accomplish in terms of scale and rollout? And what are the steps you'll take to get there? Perfect. And so as I mentioned, a rollout plan as well. So things to think about as you're crafting your plan for rolling out your concept, or what's the R&D period? So you'll have a handful of weeks to experiment with these materials in a small way. And then what's the anticipated period to take those materials and start to create a finished product that could be rolled out at scale? And we'd love to see your thinking behind that. And then viable product mock-up that could be and very well may be the prototype that you'll be submitting to us at the end of this phase. But again, what's your thinking around there in terms of reiteration and adjusting the design, and how many rounds do you intend to do that? A go-to-market plan. So if you have a public-facing product, or even if your product is sort of based on municipality partnerships, what's the go-to-market plan? What's the timeline there? Who are the partners you'll be talking to in order to make that happen? Will you be going directly online for sales? If you're public facing, will you be partnering with retailers to get on the shelves of major stores? What's the plan there, and how will you get that product out into the world and let people know about it? Manufacturer and development plan, not dissimilar from the R&D period. So again, who are those manufacturing partners that you need to bring in order to create this concept at scale? And what's that timeline look like? Then of course, material volume by date and specific material type. So again, we just want to see some evidence of thinking around, okay, we kind of know how much material we need at what point. And so this relates closely to the R&D period. So in 6 months, we anticipate being at X mark on the R&D timeline. At that point, we'll need a certain amount of materials in order to step up to the next level, and so on. And then specific material types. So many of you, unless otherwise requested, have gotten most, if not all, of the Nike Grind materials that we have available. And so as you start to experiment with those, which ones are performing at the standards that you need for your product, and then make sure to let us know which products you'll be prioritizing moving forward.
This is the optional refinement phase task, which is to create a team video. We're really curious about your stories, what brought you into this challenge, and just getting to know your process a little bit better. So if you have the bandwidth, and again, this is completely optional, but we welcome a scrappy and quick team video. You can share the stories of the folks on your team, explain how your idea for the challenge was born, talk about what inspired you to join the Nike Design with Grind Challenge. Some of you have shared a little bit about that already on this call. Or you can show a behind-the-scenes glimpse into your refinement phase process. So what is the space that you're working within? What is the country context that you're working within? What does it look like to prototype? Give us a glimpse, again, into that process. And this just allows us to get a better sense of who you are and, again, what it's been like during the refinement phase. And this can be uploaded as well on the external form, which we'll share a little bit about shortly.
That's great. And Lauren, just to add to the video, it is optional, but we do encourage you to submit it. It's just a great way for Nike and our judges to see who's proposing this idea, and understand a little bit of your intentions behind it. Sort of what's the team structure, what's your background, and this can be a scrappy video. It doesn't have to be a highly refined, polished video. It can be as simple as a sort of FaceTime recording or something like that, though we certainly welcome quality submissions. But really, it's just a way for us and our judges to get to know you all a little bit better.
We've equipped you with some refinement phase tools to support you in the next couple weeks in your prototyping process. The first is systems to receive feedback. This is thinking about how will you embed feedback loops in your prototyping process to consistently be able to receive feedback and then iterate that into your designs. How will you capture that feedback, and how will you also share with us those learnings and your thought processes in your final submission to us. We've also included the user experience map. You may want to include a user experience map while building your prototype. So considering who are the individuals that are going to be interacting with your end product, who are some stakeholders that you may need to involve in your process or get buy-in from as you start to roll out your concept. This is just a great tool to think about who are the humans that you will need to engage with to bring your product to life, and how can understanding their needs and desires best inform your design process. And then lastly, a core resource that you've heard and seen shared with you throughout the challenge is the Circular Design Guide. This is a step-by-step guide for all things circular design and circular economy. For this particular part of the challenge, we highly recommend looking at the rapid prototyping and smart material choices section, as well as the circular business models, which is the business model canvas that we included earlier on in this presentation. If you have questions about circular design, this will be your go-to and probably most comprehensive resource.
And again, all of these tools are linked in the congratulations email we sent out a couple weeks ago, so you can find all of those resources there as well.
We also heard some questions around what are past challenge examples and where can I find those on the platform. So all of the examples from previous challenges are available for you to look at on the platform if you're curious about what a final submission might look like. Some examples that we'd encourage you to take a peek at are from the Circular Design Challenge, the New Life Challenge, the Higher Ed Challenge, and the Small Scale Farmers Challenge. Again, just to see what were some of the ways that these teams were able to take idea to action with product, with different types of products that they created, what were some ways that they engaged in getting feedback from users, and lastly, what were some ways that they were able to synthesize all of their learnings and share those with us in a really clear way. So again, you'll receive this whole deck with all of the links attached, and we'd encourage you to take a peek at some previous submissions to serve as inspiration for what you can do during the refinement phase. Chris, do you want to talk about submissions?
Sure. So yeah, our refinement questions will be submitted into an external form, and so you've been shared that link, but we'll send it out again with this deck as we send it along. And so this is external form. We wanted to be sensitive to the fact that, well, one, you all are on the private submission track, so your submissions are not viewable by the public at this time anyways, but this is just an external form that you can use to submit your final refinement questions. And so within that form, you'll see some targeted questions, some areas to upload files. So therein you can upload any sort of two-dimensional or blueprint mock-ups of your concept, your prototype, upload a video, upload business model canvas, and other supporting materials. So again, we'll share that link out. You've got it in that congratulations email, but we'll make sure we share it again as we get closer to the submission date.
And I know some folks were wondering if you do have additional pitch decks or additional materials that you've created that you want to share with us that are not necessarily explicitly asked for in the 4 refinement phase tasks. Where and is that an option for you to submit? It is absolutely an option for you to submit those, and we'd welcome any additional content that will help us, again, have an insight into your team and your idea. So we have various attachment sections in this external form. So again, if you do have additional pieces of content that you would really love for us to see, we welcome those, and those can all be submitted through this form. You cannot save a draft of this form as you are filling it out, so we highly suggest taking a look at it and taking those questions into another document so that you and your team can work collaboratively throughout the refinement phase to start to fill those out.
Excellent. And just a reminder that the refinement phase deadline is July 16th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, so do mark your calendars for that. And especially consider that date as you're thinking about shipping your prototypes back to us. So, you know, factor that in, but that's our deadline. And since we're here, and as we're sort of wrapping up before we move into the next section, wanted to give the opportunity for Eric of Nike to add any thoughts around what we're looking for, any of the content we've covered thus far.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Chris. So you can see it in the way that the asks of you guys for the refinement phase are structured. But at Nike, we're a culture of makers, and really, when folks are going to be taking a look at the ideas that you're submitting, and we're expecting to have a pretty high level panel of judges on this process, with folks from Nike design all the way to sustainability and supply chain, taking a look at these ideas. Having something tangible is really important, and so folks will love to have something that they can hold their hands, a video they can view, evidence for how a process is working or not working, and that kind of thing. I think is going to be really helpful. So the more tangible examples of how you're innovating with these materials, the better. And beyond that, again, I just have to reiterate that we're really excited to see what you guys can do.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And lastly, we'll dive into a Q&A with some questions that we heard from each of you. So the first question that to kick us off is, should I be developing new ideas from scratch or only improving on existing product ideas? Chris, would you want to speak to that? Chris, I think you're on
Good there. Absolutely. So, again, your concepts have been selected because of the fact that they're very compelling and innovative, and we think there's a high potential for success there. So we certainly encourage you to continue down that pathway of exploring and iterating around that concept. If you do find that you're running into a technical issue where the materials just aren't performing in a way that supports your initial design hypothesis, let us know, reach out to us, and we'll open a dialogue and see how you can pivot and what some of the directions we may suggest for you to explore are from that. But then overall for the challenge, again, this is something that you've already accomplished by getting this far. But no, we weren't looking for brand new products, just innovation as an application tool to come up with products or redesigning products or coming up with compelling new ways to deliver a product, specifically using Nike Prime materials.
Another question we've heard a lot is, do we have access to examples of the refinement phase evolution from previous challenges? So we covered this a little bit earlier today, but the answer is broadly yes. Again, you all submitted to the private track, so your ideas are not viewable by the public for the challenge. However, in past challenges, any of the public content is still available. The one that's most close to the challenge is most closely related to the one that you all are diving into would be the circular design challenge that was from last year, which is featured on our platform. So if you're curious about the ways in which concepts have evolved, and again, some of the mechanisms that they use to gather user feedback, some of the ways that they used videos to convey their concepts, and to see what a final top idea content-wise looks like, we would highly suggest that you take a peek at that previous challenge. And then lastly, a question was, can a prototype focus on a specific characteristic of the product? So the answer is broadly yes. However, we'd be really excited to see a prototype that can represent the viability of your concept as a whole. So whether that's a mock-up, whether that's a physical prototype that you mail into Nike folks for some type of gallery viewing, whatever represents, again, minimum viable product is what we're most excited to see. Additionally, we would encourage you to, through the rapid prototyping process, think about how you can take your idea to action as quickly as possible. So what is the quickest way that you can receive feedback from your end users or from folks that, again, you'll be engaging with to roll out your concept? So that way you can iterate and gather those learnings and share those out with us throughout the refinement phase process. Chris, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this?
I think in terms of focusing on a specific characteristic, obviously we understand that some of these concepts that you've submitted are relatively complex and have a lot of components that go into the whole product. And so some of those components may be more known to you in terms of just standard manufacturing or design practices. And so if there's some real experimentations that are happening in how do you apply the Nike grind materials to this component of my product, we're certainly going to want to see a primary focus put there. You know, just to summarize and step back, we want to certainly see demonstrations of the entire product or your entire concept. But again, if there's a particularly complex portion that's utilizing Nike grind materials in a new way to you or manufacturing, and that's where you need to put the primary focus of your time and energy in the next few weeks, we certainly understand that and we'll look for that.
Wanted to again remind you of this slide, where we are in relation to the deadline, which is July 16th at 5:00 p.m. We will keep reminding you of this. You've come very, very far in our process, and we are super excited to engage with you in the next couple of weeks. We also know that this is a fairly tight timeline, so I think what Chris spoke to with respect to prototyping, given the time constraints, we can't wait to see what you make and what you come up with. If you have any questions, please email us at circular@ideo.com. Many of you have already emailed us your questions or updates about receiving materials. So we welcome all updates from you. And again, if you have additional questions, you can feel free to reach out. We're here to support and guide you through this process and do whatever we can to ensure you have an awesome refinement phase.
Excellent. And yeah, just want to reiterate, do send us questions, even as you're progressing and going along, even if it feels like a sort of a quick thought or a quick question from you all, send it along. You know, we do read these, we check this email every day, and we'll do our best to either answer you directly, or we'll also be compiling some of your more technical or material questions you may have, and working with Nike to host another webinar in a couple weeks. We'll share that date out with you shortly. And that will have give us the opportunity to go really deep into materials and technical questions. So we'll have some Nike experts and Nike designers. And so if you do have questions as you're starting to experiment with those materials, log them, send them along to us, and we'll make sure that they're included into the webinar content coming up.
Great. Eric, would love to see if you have any closing thoughts before we end the call today.
Yeah, I mean, huge thanks, guys, for making the time today, and big thanks to the Open Idea team. You know, I, like a lot of you guys, am just really excited to get to work and see what we can do.
Great.
Excellent. And wondering, anybody on the call, again, keeping in mind that we'll have a more technical and materials-based webinar shortly. In terms of what we're looking for today or submissions, do you have any questions for us since we're all here?
Hello, Enrico here. We have a quite big product, probably in the end. I noticed that there's a limitation in dimension, more or less 1 meter square, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can we send you something that it's gonna be a sort of proof of concept more than a prototype of the product?
Yeah, I think that's a great question for Eric, I think.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, with especially massive product ideas, or even for, you know, especially complicated ones, I think proofs of concept of elements of the idea, especially the most tricky elements where Nike grind is being incorporated, are satisfactorily kind of meet our requirements for proofs of concept, so folks can have a look. You know, especially if it's coupled with a more detailed explanation of how that fits into the overall product idea.
Excellent. Thanks, Eric. Any other questions from the folks on the call today?
Yes, sorry. About the shipping of the concepts and the prototypes, I think you went quickly through the slide, it said that it would be prepaid or something like that. But is that going to be sent to us, or just to make sure that the people in transportation and logistics have that in mind?
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great question. So we will be providing a prepaid shipping label and sending that over to you all as we get a little bit closer to the submission date. So we'll make sure that that's sort of in your hands with enough time to get it shipped out as you're wrapping things up. And Eric, any additional thoughts on that?
No, that sounds good. More to come on that. Thanks for the question.
All right. Any last final thoughts or questions?
Hello, this is Nico speaking.
Hi, Nico.
Hey, just wondering, there will be a ceremony at the end of this contest. I think we haven't been through it. It will be like a ceremony, prize ceremony, or, I mean, we coming from Europe, we have to also like plan ahead and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And so when we've certainly been discussing with Nike, and I think Eric may have some thoughts there, but I think stay tuned. And then Eric, I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, no specifics on that yet. We're looking at options. If we were to do something, an in-person ceremony or event of some sort, we would definitely be careful to make sure that we're giving everybody ample time to plan for it. And so, if we were to do something, we're looking at like probably more in the August, September timeline than June and July. So we ought to have enough time, I hope, to plan. And as Chris said, yeah, we'll discuss that with you guys before we decided to do anything like that.
Yep, great. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, certainly just interrupt if you do have any questions as we're wrapping up. But again, you've got that email address, circular@ido.com. Any questions that come up, even again, if it's just a sort of a passing thought as you're walking to work or sort of walking to coffee, send it along and we'll do our best to answer that. So don't hesitate to reach out.